Kit Harington walked into Maison without a reservation, without a suit, and if you asked Graham Stokes, without the slightest chance. The maître d', with an arrogant smile, saw Kit's worn shoes and serene gaze and made a fatal mistake. He judged the man in front of him. What he didn't know, however, was that Kit had something much greater than just his silence. Before we start this jaw-dropping story, leave a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. And if you're a fan of intriguing stories like this one, don't forget to hit the subscribe button, because tomorrow we have another incredible story waiting for you. At first, the maître d' didn't look up. The Maison had rules, unspoken but engraved in marble columns and whispered by the clinking of crystal glasses. No sneakers, no noise, and definitely no one in worn leather jackets. When Kit Harington walked through the revolving door, he didn't just enter the restaurant, he disrupted it. The lighting was golden and calculated, creating soft halos around couples in silk and men in tailored suits. Laughter floated from the champagne bar, forks clinked against porcelain. Everything was carefully planned, precise, pretentious. And then the sound of worn boots against the polished floors. Graham Stokes, the maître d', finally looked up and immediately narrowed his eyes. The man in front of him looked like he had stepped out of a bar in East LA, not Manhattan's most exclusive restaurant. Faded jeans, black t-shirt, worn jacket, no Rolex, no visible sign of status. "Can I help you?" Graham asked, adjusting his vest with exaggerated calm. "Yes," Kit replied in a soft, polite voice. "I was hoping to get a table. I hear your chef makes excellent foie gras." Graham tilted his head as if he hadn't quite heard. "It's reservation only, sir." Kit smiled slightly. "No problem, I don't mind waiting." Graham leaned forward slightly over the podium. "Our waiting list is 6 weeks long, and we have standards." He didn't need to say, "Look at yourself," but the message hung in the air. Kit's expression didn't change. His eyes, calm and inscrutable, swept the room. He noted the velvet chairs, the sommelier, the customers pretending not to look. Then he turned his attention back to Graham. "I understand," Kit said calmly, "but I'm not here to impress anyone, I'm just hungry." Graham's smile curved, professional and poisonous. "Very well, we have a table near the kitchen." He said it like an insult wrapped in silk. Kit nodded once. "Perfect." As Graham led him through the maze of white tablecloths, a few heads turned, some in recognition, most in judgment. Who was this man, and why did he walk like he owned the place? Because one day they would find out. But not yet. Not until they saw the table he had been assigned. Not until the first insult was served. Not until the balance was shifted. For now, he was just a man who didn't belong there, and no one knew how much that would cost them. The table was a joke. It was right next to the kitchen doors, catching all the steam and the sound of pots clanging. The overhead light flickered enough to be annoying, and the table wobbled slightly on the uneven floor. The silver napkin ring was stained, something Graham would never allow for anyone he considered worthy. But that was the point. "This table," Graham said with an exaggerated flourish, "offers an intimate experience with our culinary process." He threw the menu onto the table with a thud, letting it slide a little, almost falling off the edge. Kit picked it up with one hand and looked up, slowly. "Thank you," he said simply. "No problem," Graham replied, the fake smile still fixed on his face. "Let us know if you need the children's menu." A soft laugh came from a nearby booth. Two meticulously groomed customers watched the exchange with mocking smiles. One of them, a man in a blue pinstriped suit, leaned toward his companion and whispered, "I think the kitchen brought their cousin to dinner." Kit opened the menu, indifferent. He examined the items slowly, as if the room hadn't already labeled him, as if the laughter and whispers weren't meant to drive him away. A waiter passed behind him with a heavy tray, almost touching his shoulder, and cast a subtle look of pity before disappearing into the kitchen. After a moment, Graham returned, pen in hand, as if it were a weapon. "Ready to order?" Kit didn't look at him. "Yes, I'll have the foie gras rare and a glass of Chateau d'Em 2001. Graham blinked. His hand paused in mid-air, pen suspended. "You do know that's a $360 dish and a $250 glass of wine, don't you?" Kit nodded, not looking up. "I know." Graham hesitated long enough to show his irritation, then wrote down the order with a touch of excessive pressure. "Very well, it's your tab." As he turned to leave, his eyes met those of a couple sitting in the center of the room. The woman, dressed in emerald green silk, raised an eyebrow. Graham shook his head and smiled. "Some people love to waste everyone's time," he muttered, loud enough for her to hear. Back at his post, Graham leaned over and whispered to the sommelier, "Give him yesterday's bottle. He won't notice the difference." Meanwhile, Kit Harington remained perfectly still. Kit felt the stares on him, the judgment, the mockery, but nothing seemed to affect him. He picked up the corner of his napkin, unfolded it slowly and placed it on his lap with the calmness of a man who knew he had time to eat, time to be patient, time to let the others dig their own graves, because there are things that don't appear on the menu, and respect was one of them. The foie gras arrived with pomp and circumstance. 2 large silver lids, so polished they reflected the chandeliers above, floated toward the table in the hands of a nervous waiter. He placed one of them in front of Kit carefully, as if each movement were a promise. For a moment, even the kitchen doors behind him fell silent. Kit looked up. "Thank you." The young man nodded and turned away, but was intercepted midway by Graham Stokes, who took the bottle from his tray with a contemptuous smile. "I'll take care of that," Graham said, approaching Kit's table with the bottle cradled in his arms like an offering. The conversation in the room died down. Glances followed him. Some were curious, others amused, and a few realized what was about to happen. Graham opened the bottle with an exaggerated flourish and raised it. "Your Chateau d'Am, sir," he said almost formally, with clear irony, "aged to perfection, just like the customers we usually serve." Kit tilted his head slightly but said nothing. Graham poured the wine a little too quickly. The liquid splashed near the rim of the glass, so close to spilling over. He placed the bottle back on the table with a little more force than necessary, and as he turned, he bumped the table with his hip. It moved only an inch, but it was enough. The plate of foie gras shook, and then, without warning, Graham leaned quickly to the side with a fake sigh. "Oops!" He hit the edge of the table with his elbow, causing the wineglass to tip over, the plate to slide, and the foie gras, with its hot, golden sauce, to fall directly onto Kit's lap. A collective gasp swept through the room, like a gentle breeze. The hot, golden sauce spread across her black pants, sticky. Crumbs and delicate garnishes got caught in the folds of the fabric. The wine followed suit, soaking her clothes like ink. Kit looked down, her jaw clenching once, almost imperceptibly. Then he picked up the napkin, his movements slow and deliberate. Graham made no effort to hide his amusement. He smiled and said, "Oh no, I guess even gourmet food recognizes a guest who's out of place." Nervous laughter spread from a nearby table. Ugly, uncomfortable. Across the room, Mr. Langston, the oldest man in a grey suit, paused mid-sip and narrowed his eyes. His fingers reached for his cell phone under the tablecloth. Kit, still cleaning his lap, looked up calmly. "Accidents happen." "Yes," Graham replied with a victorious smile. "But some attract more than others." Kit folded his napkin carefully and placed it on the table. Then he fixed Graham with a silent stare that burned colder than anger. "You've made your point," Kit said softly. "Now, I'll make mine." And in that moment, something changed. Not just in Kit's posture, but in the air around them, as if the restaurant had suddenly remembered who was being mocked. Graham turned to leave, feeling victorious. He didn't look back. He didn't need to. The plate was in Kit's lap. Wine was soaking his shirt, and the room did exactly what he wanted it to do. It watched. But what Graham didn't see was the subtle flash in Kit's eyes. It wasn't anger, it was focus, as if something had fallen into place. He reached into his jacket pocket, even though it was soaked, and pulled out a small, worn wallet. From inside, he took out a black metal card, smooth except for a single silver symbol, an emblem used only by the founding investors of the Maison Group. He placed it gently on the table. Across the room, the older man, Mr. Langston, stood up. He had made a phone call just 2 minutes earlier. Now, a second figure appeared through the long passageway, Elijah Corbin, the restaurant's general manager. Elijah didn't answer him. He turned fully to Kit and bowed slightly. "Sir, we didn't know you were coming tonight. If we had, No." Kit interrupted, his voice calm. "You would have done exactly what you did, and that's why I came without warning." Graham's mouth opened, then closed. The guests began to whisper now, but no longer in mockery. It was reverence. The names circulated from table to table like electricity. Harington. Someone dropped a fork. Someone choked on a sip of wine. Sharp suit, even sharper eyes. He moved urgently, weaving between chairs and startled customers, heading straight for Kit Harington's table as if he had seen a ghost. Graham noticed him too late. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to..." Elijah began, but Kit interrupted him gently without looking at him. The room froze. Elijah's footsteps stopped. His previously controlled face broke, revealing recognition and dread. "Mr. Harington," he whispered. Graham blinked. Wait, what? Even the couple who had laughed earlier now had wide, embarrassed eyes. Kit picked up the metal card again and handed it to Elijah. "This should cover dinner." Elijah shook his head furiously. "Sir, absolutely not. It's on us, please." "I'll pay," Kit said firmly, then turned to Graham. "But before that, I believe we have something to discuss." Graham took a step back. I didn't know. No one told me you were..." "Exactly." Kit interrupted him. "You didn't know, and yet you chose to humiliate me. Not for who I am, but for what you assumed I am not." The room held its breath. "That is why, before I leave," Kit continued, "you will serve a table of guests that I have invited myself. People who, by your standards, don't belong either, and if you don't show them the respect you denied me, you're out by midnight." Elijah nodded once. "Understood." Graham's face drained of color, and the room, once full of judgment, was now deadly silent. Not out of respect for status, but for what had just passed through the trial by fire and emerged completely unscathed. 10 minutes later, the glass doors opened. Not with pomp, not with music, just the soft sound of the doorbell, almost drowned out by the buzz of conversation still echoing through the room. 6 people entered. They didn't belong, at least not by Maison standards. A man in a faded flannel shirt, sleeves rolled up to his elbows, revealing arms stained with dirt. A woman in a thrift store blazer, her hair pulled back into a quick, practical bun. A skinny teenager in a hoodie with a college cooking patch near the hem. 2 more, middle-aged, diverse, clearly out of place among the sharp suits and sequined dresses. And finally, a soft-spoken elderly man with a cane and a face marked by decades of hard work. Graham stood frozen behind the podium, his clipboard trembling in his hands. Elijah stepped forward. "Welcome," he said in a calm, grave tone. "Your table is ready." He gestured toward the center of the room. Murmurs followed. The central table, previously reserved for celebrities and tycoons, was hurriedly rearranged. Polished silver plates, precisely folded napkins, lit candles, and surrounding it, the eyes of the room, now unsure of what they were watching. Kit remained seated nearby, calmly drinking water. His gaze never left Graham. "You know what to do," Elijah whispered to him. Graham swallowed hard, forced a smile, and approached the group. "Good evening," he said, his voice tense. "This way." He tried to sound welcoming. He failed. As the six settled at the table, a woman in a red dress whispered to her husband, "Who are these people?" Her husband shook his head. "Some kind of performance. They'll be gone in 10 minutes. But they didn't leave. They sat down. They laughed. They looked around, curious but not nervous. Some took out their cell phones to take pictures. Not selfies, but photos of the dishes, the chandeliers, the decor. They were tourists in a place they had only seen from outside the glass. When Graham returned to deliver the menus, his fingers trembled slightly. The woman in the blazer smiled at him. "What's the difference between the truffle risotto and the wild mushroom risotto?" Graham hesitated. Then his voice dropped. "If you have to ask," he said, his tone as sharp as broken glass, "you probably can't afford either." Silence. Then a soft laugh from the man in the flannel shirt next to her. "Wow," he said, his voice light. "You really love your job, huh?" Kit, at his nearby table, slowly put his glass back on the table. He hadn't said a word, but the look in his eyes said it all. This was the real test, and Graham was already failing. As the restaurant buzzed with tension, Kit Harington moved silently through the backstage corridors, guided by memory, not authority. He didn't ask for permission. He didn't need to. The Maison's executive suite was hidden behind a narrow staff corridor, past the wine cellar and below a wall-mounted plaque bearing the names of the founding investors. His name was not there on purpose. He had chosen anonymity when he helped finance the main location years ago because, at that time, it was all about the food, the mission, not the ego. But something had changed. The lock on the executive office clicked open with a code that only 3 people should have known. Inside, soft lights hummed above clean glass walls, stacks of financial reports, and a high-tech monitor screen mounted above the desk. The air smelled of lemon polish and strategy. Kit sat down. He didn't seem angry, just determined. He accessed the administrative panel. He wasn't looking for numbers at first. He was looking for patterns. Over the past 8 months, customer satisfaction reports had been carefully suppressed. Staff comment cards had disappeared. Complaints from HR had never been escalated. The house tip system had been changed without board approval. And there it was, a trail of diverted training funds, tens of thousands of dollars listed as development grants, diverted to a shell company, VL Hospitality Group, VL Victoria Lawn. Kit's brow furrowed slightly. He swiped again. Executive bonuses had doubled. Front-of-house staff turnover had tripled. And worst of all, there was a report marked "Not Filed," documenting an intentional redirection of guests to minimize brand image risk. Translation: poorly dressed customers were assigned seats near the kitchen or simply turned away. It wasn't just Graham. Victoria had built a system to filter out anyone who didn't fit the desired profile, then rewarded those who did with discretion and cruelty. Kit leaned back in his chair. His reflection stared back at him across the glass table, calm, unchanging, but inside him, the old fire burned. Not for revenge, but for correction. This place had started as a dream, fine dining with dignity, where class wasn't measured by clothing. Kit had believed in it, but now it was a fortress for the arrogant. A soft knock on the door. It was Elijah. "She's coming down," he said. "Victoria." Kit nodded once, closing the terminal slowly. "I'm ready." He stood up, buttoned his coat, and picked up the printed records. "This isn't just about a rude maître d'," he said. "It's about a culture." Elijah met his eyes. "What do you want to do?" Kit paused at the door, then looked back at the files lit up on the screen. Something they would all remember. The room had fallen silent again, but not out of discomfort this time, but out of anticipation. Kit returned without fanfare. No grand entrance, just calm, steady footsteps, with a thin dossier in his hands. His desk was still there, still littered with the crumbs of his previous humiliation. He didn't sit down yet. He stood next to the central desk, where Graham was still trying to force a smile at the customers he wanted to see disappear. Kit spoke without raising his voice. "Mr. Stokes," he said, "one moment." Graham turned stiffly, his cheeks still red from the last exchange. "Yes, sir?" Kit placed the dossier gently on the table. "In here," he said, "is everything I need to request your immediate dismissal. Not just for your treatment of me, but for participating in an internal system of discrimination, theft, and image manipulation." A collective gasp rippled through the room. "I'm sure Ms. Lauren will be joining us shortly," Kit continued, "but you'll be out long before she is." Graham's voice broke. "This is insane." "No," Kit cut him off. "The insane thing is that you thought you had the right to decide who belonged here, simply because these people didn't look guy enough. The insane thing is believing that you could mistreat customers in a place that's supposed to elevate food and the soul, not egos." Graham's mouth opened. Nothing came out. "And just to be clear," Kit added, "I'm not firing you yet." Murmurs. Kit turned to the 6 guests at the center table. "If Mr. Stokes can serve these customers with dignity, kindness, and without a single mistake for the next 60 minutes, he keeps his job. If not, he's out by midnight." Graham stammered. "You're not serious." "Oh, I am," Kit said, nodding to Elijah, who had already started a timer on his phone. "This is absurd," Graham whispered, turning back to the group of unruly customers. But now their faces looked different to him. Confidence, curiosity, no more passivity. They watched his every move, and he could feel the stares from the room behind them. He took the orders, he brought the wine, he tried to keep his composure, but it didn't take long for him to slip up. A small request for sauce was met with a sigh. A second napkin, rolling eyes. When one of the guests, an elderly woman with a cane, asked about vegan options, he muttered, "This isn't a food truck." The murmurs started again. Kit stood up. "Time's up." Graham froze. Kit turned to the room. "Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you all for your patience tonight. What you have witnessed was not theater. It was a test, not just of one man, but of a system. And this restaurant has failed." Whispers, the clinking of glasses, a wine glass falling to the floor. Maison was founded on a simple belief: quality food is for everyone. But along the way, somewhere between the chandeliers and the reservation lists, we let the velvet rope get too tight. Victoria Lawn had just entered the room, her heels clicking sharply, her blazer whiter than snow, and she stopped when she heard her name. Kit continued, now facing her directly. "And to the executive who quietly rewrote our principles behind a smiling facade, you're done too." He held up the dossier, showing the redirected training funds, discrimination policies, internal employee intimidation, all signed under her name. Victoria's mouth opened, ready to unleash a hurricane, but Elijah stepped beside her, holding a printed copy of the same file. "Security has your badge," he said, expressionless. A silence fell again. Kit then turned calmly to the 6 guests. "Your dinner is on the house, and from now on, Maison belongs to everyone who walks through this door with respect." Timid applause began, but soon turned into something genuine. As Graham was escorted to the back, he turned once, his eyes blurry, disbelief etched into his bones. He had been the gatekeeper, and now the gate had swallowed him whole. Outside, the night was cold. Kit stood under the light of the restaurant sign, alone again. Not a hero, not a billionaire, just a man with crumbs still stuck to his jacket. And the belief that dignity, like a good meal, should never be reserved for the few. He stepped into the streetlight and disappeared into the city like steam rising from a silver plate, silent but unforgettable. That was the inspiring journey of Kit Harington and the transformative impact his courage and dignity had on Maison. But now I want to know, what did you think of this story? Do you believe that respect and kindness can really change a system from the inside out? Leave your opinion in the comments, and if this story touched you, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with someone you think needs to hear this message. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more stories that show the power of empathy, courage, and change. Want even more inspiration? Click on one of the videos appearing on the screen now and embark on another exciting journey. See you in the next video.